Welcome to CappCon 2018. It's been an incredible 10 years since our very first commit to GitHub. Hard to believe it, right? And today we're going to make a historical release. We have 3 great new features that I think you guys will like. But before we get to that, I want to talk to you guys about crayons. Yeah, crayons. Let's talk about crayons. Let's go back in time. 280 Slides was a revolutionary product when it was first released. It really was. I still remember that sense of excitement I had when I saw it. Do you guys remember what a state-of-the-art online application looked like in 2008, 10 years ago? Do you remember what Gmail looked like back then? This is what Gmail looked like in 2008. Beautiful. And here's 280 Slides. Released the same year. It's like putting a stone axe next to a spaceship, isn't it? Let me show you again, just in case you didn't notice the subtle difference. Gmail, 280 Slides. You almost feel a little sad for Gmail, like, why would you put a stone axe next to a spaceship? It's not fair, right? I'm sure someone banged a lot of rocks together to make that stone axe. Back then, I hadn't been involved in the project yet. So when I saw this thing, I was stunned. It blew me away. It was the most beautiful, seamless, and eloquent transition from desktop app to online app that had ever happened in our industry. And it was the work of just 3 people. The minute you saw this application, if you were doing traditional web development like I was, you paused. So back then, I was writing an email app with a couple of guys. We wanted to do a better Gmail. We wanted to create a richer, more interactive experience, something more like a traditional email client. Then Cappuccino was released, and it felt like I was the guy holding a stone axe. It was like I had just finished a very difficult, yet ultimately disappointing crayon drawing. No matter how much blood, sweat, or tears I put into it, all it ever was, or ever would be, was a crayon drawing, or maybe a stone axe. What on earth was I even playing at? These guys were light years ahead. I literally felt ashamed of my dinky little email app after I saw this. How were they so far ahead? It wasn't knowledge, passion, or desire, although I'm sure all of those things helped. It was simply taking the traditional process and turning it on its head. They had come at it from a different angle. The rest of us were saying, how can we take a traditional web page and make it a little more powerful? What can we add to make our HTML page just a little more interactive? But those weren't the right questions. There were different questions that could have been asked, questions that changed the perspective. The Cappuccino guys were asking, what if we put a real app online? Is that allowed? What do we need to sacrifice to make that happen? And as you guys know, it turned out they didn't have to sacrifice anything at all. They essentially took a full-fat desktop app, recreated it to run on the web. Cappuccino brought a fountain pen to a crayon fight. I knew I needed to work on this, so I did. In 2009, I had committed so much code that I was actually contacted by Ross, and he said, "Oh my God, we're spending too much time reading your code. Either we make you a core dev, or we just ban you from the project." Spoiler alert, they didn't ban me from the project. I'm still here. Lucky for me. And that's how I got involved. Then, shortly thereafter, or maybe not so shortly, a couple of years thereafter, a big company came and they bought out 280 North, and the story almost ended there. It ended almost by indifference. Spoiler alert again, didn't actually end, right? We are all here. A dedicated group of us picked up the torch and we went for it. Because the fundamental idea was still right. We didn't want to make a slightly better web page. To paraphrase badly, we didn't want to make a faster horse, right? We wanted to make apps for the web. And I'm going to talk a little bit longer about that. Why is it that we're doing this? Why is it that we have to do it this way? What are we trying to improve? And why? And you know, the web is great. It's beautiful, it's complex, it has all this opportunity. The web revolution has been just fantastic. We have finally reached a point where we have true cross-platform apps that actually look and run well on different operating systems, on all different classes of devices. Different platforms, different devices, different apps, it works. But it's also a backwards place. We lost something quite precious along the way. Along the way, we lost 20 years of UI and user experience development. 20 years of iteration to create a competent, usable, and human-friendly experience. In the transition to the web, we lost either the will or the capacity to make great apps. It's not like it's impossible to write a great app that runs on the web. Clearly not. The pieces are there. You can do desktop-y things on the web. There are libraries. You can do drag and drop. You can have an undo stack. All it takes is a dramatic, almost Herculean amount of HTML and JavaScript, and you can glue all of those things together and you get an app. Some of us don't want to reinvent the wheel, but let's say you do. Let's say you're a rebuilder. You're fine reinventing all these things every time you need them. But even if you go ahead and you create all of that basic stuff, now your app has become kind of complicated. And not just for you, but for the people using it. People have a hard time figuring out how to use your app because of your flavor of these particular features. You pull them from disparate UI libraries, and as a result of your Frankensteinian monster of these various tools, your interactions are just slightly different from the next guy's. There's no uniform, common way of doing things. Take some of the best web applications today, made by your big Silicon Valley companies. They often do take usability seriously. They spend a good amount of time and ample resources making nice, interactive apps. And if you actually look at the user interface of something like Gmail in isolation, it's not bad. It does a lot of nice things. You can drag and drop an email. Sometimes you can undo. There are some tabs. There's some functionality in there. But if you put it side by side, pound for pound, with a desktop app, your perspective changes. Your standards change entirely. When not looking at it in isolation, when comparing it to a real app, suddenly it goes from not bad to hopeless. Take drag and drop, for example. Drag your mouse the wrong way, and it causes some chaos theory experiment to occur in your browser, an explosion of text selection in Gmail. Who knows what happened? You can undo an operation, but not with a keyboard, and only in some limited cases. Maybe even just one case. I don't know. I'm not sure. Columns are not sortable in that main email table. All of those shortfalls are subtle. You would never have accepted them in a desktop or Windows app. Mac or Windows app. Remember when I was trying to make my email app with crayons? Google doubled down on the crayons. They brought 1,000 crayons to bear on this problem of making an online email app. Yet, they never got to the level of even a single desktop app. They will never achieve that level of quality. Not unless they take a fundamentally different approach. Not unless they start thinking about what tools they're using. For the arsenal of resources they have at their disposal, they have yet to acquire that fountain pen. And there's more. There's more to what make apps great. It's a little harder to describe, but I'll give it a go. There are modern desktop apps, there are things that modern desktop apps do that you might never have thought about consciously, but they still make your life easier. These are little touches that make a user interface great. It's a little bit like when you board an airplane and they give you the chicken pasta. It's not good, it's not the real thing, but you might not be entirely sure why. It sure looks like chicken. Even if you can't put your finger on it, you know you've had better. And common apps on the web are the same. Even if you can't put your finger on why a web application isn't as good as a real desktop app, you know it isn't. For example, take an imaginary photo app. You click on something, say a photo in a collection, and then you press the left arrow key. What do you expect will happen? On your Mac, probably you just selected the photo directly to the left of the photo you clicked on originally. On the web, you're probably, I don't know, best case, nothing at all happens. Worst case, you go back one page or something weird like that, something unexpected. And there are reasons for why this works so well in a desktop app, but you just don't get that to work on the web. And again, you might not even know these things. You might not be able to, if challenged, you might not know what it is about this app that is a little bit weird, a little bit off, but you know it is. It's not that it's impossible to get it right. It's just a lot of effort. Even the most keen JavaScript developers are likely to miss a couple of use cases like these. It's a lot of effort to make every single detail work just right. It takes too much effort, too much resources, and too much time for most people. It may work right in some of the cases, some of the time, for some of the users. which prompts the question, is the desktop app that gets every UI detail some kind of special, super awesome app? If it supports keyboard navigation or resizing panes or selecting all rows in a table correctly, like all of the time? Is that a super awesome, unparalleled, revolutionary desktop app? Oh, it's just a regular desktop app. Just a regular app. And you can see where I'm going with this. How are these web apps by big brand name companies having such a difficult time making great apps? You might say, well, that's not a fair comparison. The web is more limited than the desktop. You can't just expect apps on the web to have the same kind of precision, the same standards, the same fidelity. Can you? There's some truth in that, yeah, obviously desktop apps have a head start. For how long is that a valid excuse? Like 5 years? 10 years? Gmail, and I don't mean to have a go specifically at Google, it's just a good example. Gmail has been around for a long time now. It just turned 14 actually. That's 14 years of R&D by one of the biggest enterprises on this planet. And they just can't do it. They cannot make a web app with a great desktop class UI. So we have $1 million company, $1 billion company, spending a decade and a half on a product, and it cannot match a one-day-old Xcode project in some certain key aspects. You drop a table in Xcode, it's going to work right from the start. Google doesn't have a table that works right after 15 years. How many millions do they spend getting to a point that's not great? What I want to say is that it's about drawing with crayons. If you do what you always have done, you'll get what you always got. I know it's true because I did that. I painstakingly drew in every little detail of a good UI, and I spent 10 times as long to get half as far. I perfected the wrong answer. I didn't have a proper foundation to stand on. I didn't necessarily have bad tools, but I had the wrong tools. I was trying to paint a Da Vinci painting using a Crayola number 51. You can't build a great house on mud. You need a foundation. And also, you can't build a great house if your hammer is made out of spaghetti. We're here to make real hammers and a real foundation. We're here to make crayon-free development a reality. So at this point, I hope that you have noticed two things. First of all, you gotta use the right tools to get the job done. And second of all, I really love metaphors. I don't think that these big companies made a conscious decision to approach web apps in such a haphazard way. If anything, they were pragmatic. Anyhow, I've got to say that so that I don't get sued. Web development used to be hard. Some of you will probably remember how even basic things like drawing a line on the screen was difficult. Like defining classes and exceptions. Anyone remember prototype.js? Yeah? Yeah, I remember it too. I try to forget. Just drawing a simple line on the screen used to be a big deal. And while we're listing things that should be easy, but aren't easy, well, I'll add a couple more. Making things run fast. Providing a simple and coherent object model, laying out your controls. Simple stuff, right? And when those things, those simple things are hard, you will naturally lower your ambitions. You have to deliver a product. So the intricacies, the not so important stuff, falls by the wayside. So Gmail delivered their product, and from then on, ambitions grew slowly. We got drag and drop eventually. We got 5-second undos eventually. But they never got around to replacing those foundations. And those foundations show through the cracks. It's really difficult to change your foundations once you've built an app already. So ambitions were lowered. And we didn't think that way. We saw things a different way. Cappuccino is an ambitious framework. It's the one that says, you know what? We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to take a great wheel that already exists, port it to the web, call it Wheel 2.0, if you will. It's a framework that raises the bar, it sets new standards, it pushes the norms on the web. But it's only pushing them to get back to where we were on the desktop. It's this framework that will take decades of UI experience from the desktop and transplant it to the web. And you don't have to look any farther than where we started to see that it is possible. We've done it. Many people have now done it using Cappuccino. When Cappuccino was released, it sent shockwaves through the community. Desktop caliber apps running on the web. In 280 slides, you could rotate images with handles. You could get little live previews of slides. There was a real toolbar. The amazing thing is that if it were released today, it would still be good, 10 years on. And that's when we use, Cappuccino 0.7. And from that point, we kept moving. We've come leaps and bounds since then. What was possible with Cappuccino then was only the beginning. After that point, we have delivered at least twice over as many features. We have created an entirely new way to make apps for the web. And we're setting new standards. Let's talk about what we can do when we put away our crayons, or spaghetti hammer, or stone axe, or whatever I'm talking about. First of all, we can make a detailed, internally consistent, modern, well-behaved UI and user experience. And we can do it with ease. That might actually be the single most important thing, but I'll give you a couple more. Remember those things I mentioned that should be easy because they're simple, but actually they're hard despite being simple on the web? Selection. Rich text selection that you are in actual control of as a developer. Cappuccino does that. Drag and drop. Yeah, of course. Cappuccino does that. Drag one thing, drag many things is not a big deal. You will not get a textual explosion of selection. We have intuitive, fully functional keyboard navigation. You click on something, you use the keyboard, the thing you expected to happen, happens. Isn't it great? Powerful visual composition and construction, built from a simple model. Text, images, dynamic layouts. You could write Apple pages in Cappuccino, and it would be fun. And we have seen people actually recreate iPhoto for the web in Cappuccino, and these are one-man teams. Now compare that to God knows how many people work on Gmail, right? Remember when I spoke about those subtle behaviors of an app that we take for granted on the desktop? Even if we don't know about them, we sense them. And Cappuccino has got them all. Cappuccino's undo and redo stack, for instance, is the real deal. You can undo one action, you can undo many. With a little bit of work, you can make an app that can undo everything from the beginning of your document to the point you are right now. There are hundreds of other little things like this that you would never bother to implement if all you had was, I don't know, prototype.js, jQuery, React. Even if you did re-implement all of these things, you would probably create something that's subtly wrong and subtly different from what the next guy does. With Cappuccino, you get these powerful features for free, and they are consistent. When we write apps, we want to focus on the big things. We don't want to spend days recreating all the vagaries of text input or sortable tables or selection. And given the choice between making a really nice table or adding a revenue generating feature, we'll probably go for the latter. The only way it's going to make sense to get 100 of these little things right every time is if the hard work has already been done for you. And I think just because we write UI on the web, that doesn't mean the old rules, the old standards go out the window. It doesn't mean we should be less ambitious. I think UI on the web is exactly like UI anywhere else. It's about consistency. It's about the details. It's about what feels natural and what just works. Some very big and very modern projects have proven that just throwing money at it is not enough. We need to question the way we do things, the direction we approach the problem from, and we need to raise our ambitions. We have to start with the right foundations. You have to start with the right foundations. You have to start with the right tools. You have to start with Cappuccino. We have built an outstanding framework that gives you the best way to create an app that runs on the web. And I think it's time you put down your crayons. Let's just make some great apps. Therefore, today it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Cappuccino 1.0. Cappuccino 1.0 is the culmination of a decade of work. I can't possibly talk about everything that's in there, I'm not gonna. But I will mention just a few things that we are proud of in Cappuccino 1. First one is Node. You can now use Node.js to compile and use Cappuccino. Second thing is source maps. You can now debug Objective-J code right in the browser. Look at that, that's actual Objective-J code running in the browser, and we're live debugging it. We have an all-new text view. And this is the real thing. This is not content editable. We actually recreated the basics of rich text editing inside of Cappuccino in order to get control, 100% control, so that you can do it the way you want to do it. No textual explosions. And these features and many more will be covered later today during our talks. And Cappuccino 1.0 will be released today. Before I go, I'm going to show you one last thing. The original UI for Cappuccino, called Aristo, looked great. However, it was made for a different era. So in Aristo 2, we simplified it. It's a little more streamlined, a little more polished. And there's a natural extension to that direction. And today I have just a small preview of that. And this will be Aristo 3. But that's not in 1.0. Thank you all. Please enjoy the conference.